January 21st, Saint Agnes, Virgin and Martyr. Saint Agnes has always been looked upon in the Church as a special patroness of bodily purity, and her name is commemorated every day in the canon of the Mass. Rome was the scene of her triumph, and Prudentius says that her tomb was shown within the site of that city. She suffered, perhaps, not long after the beginning of the persecution of Diocletian, whose cruel edicts were published in March in the year 303. We learn from St. Ambrose and St. Augustine that she was only 12 or 13 years of age at the time of her glorious death. Her riches and beauty excited the young noblemen of the first families in Rome to contend as rivals for her hand. Agnes answered them all that she had consecrated her virginity to a heavenly husband, who could not be beheld by mortal eyes. Her suitors, finding her resolution unshakable, accused her to the governor as a Christian, not doubting that the threats and torments would prove more effective with one of her tender years, on whom allurements could make no impression. The judge at first employed the mildest expressions and most seductive promises, to which Agnes paid no regard, repeating always that she could have no other spouse but Jesus Christ. He then made use of threats, but found her endowed with a masculine courage, and even eager to suffer torment and death. At last, terrible fires were made, and iron hooks, racks, and other instruments of torture were displayed before her, along with threats of immediate execution. The heroic child surveyed them undismayed, and made good cheer in the presence of the fierce and cruel executioners. She was so far from betraying the least symptom of terror that she even expressed her joy at the sight, and offered herself to the rack. She was then dragged before the idols and commanded to offer incense, but could, St. Ambrose tells us, by no means be compelled to move her hand except to make the sign of the cross. The governor, seeing his measures ineffectual, said he would send her to a house of prostitution, where what she prized so highly would be exposed to the insults of the brutal and licentious youth of Rome. Agnes answered that Jesus Christ was too jealous of the purity of his chosen ones to suffer it to be violated in such a manner, for he was their defender and protector. "You may," she said, "stain the sword with my blood, but you will never be able to profane my body consecrated to Christ." The governor was so incensed at this that he ordered her to be immediately led to the place of shame, with liberty to all to abuse her person at will. Many young profligates ran thither, full of wicked desires, but were seized with such an awe at the sight of the saint that they durst not approach her. Only one excepted, who, attempting to be rude to her, was that very instant, by a flash as it were of lightning from heaven, struck blind, and fell trembling to the ground. His companions, terrified, took him up and carried him to Agnes, who was singing hymns of praise to Christ, her protector. The Virgin by prayer restored his sight and his health. The chief accuser of the saint, who had at first sought to gratify his lusts and avarice, now, in a spirit of vindictiveness, incited the judge against her, his passionate fondness being changed into fury. The governor needed no encouragement, for he was highly exasperated to see himself set at defiance by one of her tender age and sex. Being resolved, therefore, upon her death, he condemned her to be beheaded. Agnes, filled with joy on hearing the sentence, went to the place of execution more cheerfully than others go to their wedding. The executioner had instructions to use all means to induce her to give way, but Agnes remained constant, and having made a short prayer, bowed down her neck to receive the death stroke. The spectators shed tears to see this beautiful child, loaded with fetters, and offering herself fearlessly to the sword of the executioner, who, with trembling hand, cut off her head at one stroke. Her body was buried a short distance from Rome. Here a basilica was erected in her honor before 354 by Constantina, daughter of Constantine.